Good, good, and welcome. Thank you for helping us out. We really appreciate it.
No problem. Keep on inviting us back.
We will, we will.
Now, while we're waiting, Estelle, you located where now?
Say again.
Where are you located?
Oh, I'm in Indy, out of Indy.
Okay, okay. And Brien, how about you?
I'm from Indianapolis as well.
You both from Indianapolis. Okay, okay. You both have been connected with the organizations for some time?
I've been with the EEOC for about 20 years.
20 years. Yes, yes, yes. How about you, Estelle?
Wow, Brien, I didn't know that. I've been with the Department of Labor 7 years, but prior to that, I was with the Department of Defense. So pretty much 20 years of service as well with the government.
Good. And you've acquired a lot of knowledge during that time. You both have.
Yeah, a little bit. Just
How has this, let me ask you a quick question while we're waiting. How has this pandemic affected your workplace and you personally?
I was actually talking about that with Crystal. It's for us at work, the Department of Labor is enforcing this new law that we discussed previously in another seminar. It's called the Families First Coronavirus Response. And that pretty much have gotten us really busy. It's some protections related to COVID-19 situations for employees. So we actually have gotten busier with trying to help out the public with that new enforcement that we have.
Sure.
Yeah. But it is what it is.
It is. Yeah. It's going to be with us for a while too.
Yep.
We've actually been lucky at the EEOC. We've been able to continue our work pretty, I wouldn't say easily. It's a little bit tougher because we aren't able to travel. So
Right.
for me, all the trainings now and all the things that I do are now virtual. And our investigators, it's a little bit more challenging for them because they can't go and have, they can't do interviews, like one-on-one interviews. They have to use the technology. So it's just a different way of looking at things. But the biggest hurdle for us is just the on-site interviews that we do and the on-site investigations.
Right. Yeah, it certainly has. It's become the new normal, as they say. It's something we're going to have to cope and live with and adjust to.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Michael. How are you?
Doing very well.
Good.
Hello, Brien and Esthela. Glad to have you on today.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you.
All right.
And we have Commissioner Ed Henry on as well.
I see him now. Yes.
Hey,
Hello,
hey,
Ed.
my brother, how are you? How
I'm
you doing?
Yes, sir. Doing well.
Good.
We'll get started in just a minute here. All right, it is 11 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar, Youth and Labor. I am Crystal McCain. I am the Director of Employment with the Human Rights Commission. And we also have Commissioner Ed Henry, who is co-hosting with me today. Ed, would you like to have a word?
Again, I say to all of you, welcome, and particularly to Esthela and Brien, we really appreciate you, you helping us out. I've been with the commission probably, 30 plus years, Crystal, I believe.
Yeah.
So I've seen a lot and tried to absorb a lot during that time to be able to help those whom we serve. And so we appreciate you helping us out with this webinar today.
Thanks, Ed. And Ed is also a past Human Resources Director for the Tribune, so he should know about youth and labor. And then we also have, as always, Michael Patton, who is the Diversity and Inclusion Officer for the city. I don't know if Michael wants to say good morning to everyone. Okay, maybe later.
Thank you, Crystal. You're fine. Good morning to everyone.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Okay, and so we do have with us today Esthela Sandoval with the Department of Labor and Brien Shoemaker with the EEOC, and they're kind of going to both present today. I think, Esthela, you're going to go first from the Department of Labor, and I'll just turn it over to you.
Okay. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
Okay,
yes.
Let's go ahead and start sharing my presentation real quick. Can you guys see it?
Yes, we can. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Esthela Sandoval, and I'm with the Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division. I'm the Community Outreach and Research Planning Specialist. And today I'm going to be talking to you guys about the child labor requirements in non-agricultural occupations under the Fair Labor Standards Act. Most employees in the United States must be paid at least minimum wage and time and a half for hours work over 40 hours in a work week. There's a lot of misconception that maybe that this does not apply to youth employment, but the answer to the question is that yes, they will be covered, and there's protections for child labor. Okay, and in order for the child labor provision to apply, there's two types of coverages under the FLSA, which is the enterprise coverage and the individual coverage. Under the enterprise coverage, if the whole enterprise will be covered and all employees will be covered and entitled to the FLSA protections. Also under the individual coverage, even if there's no enterprise coverage, some individuals may be covered under the FLSA protections. In order for an enterprise to be covered under the enterprise coverage, they have to have at least 2 employees. They have to make an ADV of at least $500,000 in a year in business. Also, hospitals, businesses providing medical or nursing care for residents, schools, preschools, and government agencies with at least 2 employees are covered on an enterprise basis, regardless of the annual dollar volume of the business. Individual coverage applies again individually, even if there's no enterprise coverage, and it will be applied to workers that are engaged in interstate commerce, production of goods for commerce, closely related process or occupation directly essential to such production, and everybody in domestic service. Engaging in interstate commerce includes making telephone calls to other states, typing letters to send to other states, processing credit card transactions that are processed in other states, and traveling to other states. Who's covered under child labor? Minors employed at establishments where goods are produced for interstate commerce. Minors employed by a covered enterprise or who themselves engage in the production of goods in interstate commerce. Bottom line, 90% of all employees of the United States are covered under the FLSA. Okay, the federal, yes.
Estelle, may I ask a question? You said 90% are covered?
90%, yes.
Why not 100%? I mean,
because there are some exemptions that will apply. That might not be covered, yeah.
Okay, got you.
And for those, if they're not covered under federal state law, they will be covered under state law, most likely. Good. Because they don't have the $500,000 threshold. They only have, like, I think their qualification is for an employer to have at least 2 employees, to my understanding. Okay. So the federal youth employment provisions do not require minors to obtain work permits. They do not limit or restrict the hours worked of minors that are 16 years old or older. And they do not require breaks or meal periods for minors. Here's a good question. What about if the federal and state laws are different? Where the federal and state laws differ, the more protected standard applies. So if the federal or state law requires a minor that is 15 years old to work to 7 p.m. During school hour during school while school is ongoing, then and the state will allow them to work till 9 p.m. The more restrictive standard will apply at that time. Hours that 14 and 15-year-olds may work, they may work 3 hours on a school day, including Fridays, up to 18 hours in a week when the school is in session, up to 8 hours on a non-school day, and 40 hours during a week when a school is not in session. And when a school is not in session is from June 1st through Labor Day through September.
Now, Estelle, I hope you don't mind me interrupting as you.
Go ahead.
This is it. Who monitors that?
The Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division.
Okay, how do you know that the employer and the worker are adhering to those rules?
Yeah, we will not be able to be in every establishment monitoring it. So most likely it will be from a complaint from a parent or, the child themselves.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Times when a 14 and 15-year-olds may work, they can work between 7 to 7 p.m. Or between 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. from June 1st through Labor Day, and outside school hours. Retail service jobs 14 and 15-year-olds may do. They can do office and clerical work. They could do cashier and selling, price marking. Hold on one second. Price marking, assembling orders, packing, bagging, and carrying out customer orders. They can do errands and deliveries by foot, bike, bus, or train, certain cleanup work and yard work, plumbing and gas and hand cleaning cars, kitchen work, preparing and serving food, but very limited cooking. Okay, most cooking is prohibited but a 14 and 15-year-olds may cook with electric or gas grills that do not entail cooking over open flame, cook with deep fryers that are equipped, and they utilize the devices that will automatically lower in and out of the oil and grease. They can also clean kitchen services and non-power equipment, filter, transport, and dispose of the oil and grease. But the employer will have to make sure that the liquids, when they are disposing of it, they do not exceed 100 Fahrenheit in temperature. What they may not do. 14 and 15-year-olds, they may not do any work in manufacturing and mining, most processing occupations, operating power-driven equipment, transportation and communications, warehouse and storage, and construction. They cannot work in or about a boiler or engine rooms, maintenance or repair of a building or equipment, work in freezers and meat coolers, do outside window washing or baking. They cannot do any work involving power-driven food slicers and grinders, choppers or cutters, and bakery mixers, loading and unloading goods to and from trucks, rail cars, and conveyors, working areas where meats are prepared for sale. All occupations declare hazardous for 16 and 17-year-olds. And now we're going to talk about the hazardous occupations. The FLSA prohibits minors under the age of 18 from performing occupations that the Secretary of Labor declares to be particularly hazardous or detrimental to their health and well-being. Currently, there's 17 hazardous orders, or commonly known as HOs. Okay, and I'm just gonna, since I don't have a lot of time, I'm just gonna briefly name the 17 hazardous orders. If you guys have any more questions in detail about these orders, you guys can give us a call at the Wage and Hour Division. The hazardous orders occupation number 1 is manufacturing and storing explosives. Number 2, driving a motor vehicle or work as an outside helper on motor vehicles. 3, coal mining. 4, logging and sawmilling. 5, power-driven woodworking machines. 6, exposure to radioactive substances and ironing, radiation. 7, power-driven hoisting. 8, power-driven metal forming, punching, and shearing machines. 9, mining other than coal. 10, power-driven meat processing machines, slaughtering and meat packing plants. 11, power-driven bakery machines. 12, power-driven paper product machines, scrap paper balers, and paper box compactors. 13, manufacturing of brick, tile, and related products. 14, power-driven circular saws, band saws, or guillotine shears. 15, wrecking, demolition, and shipwrecking operations. 16, roofing occupations and work on or about a roof. 17, trenching and excavation operations. Here it talks about the term operation as used in HO 5, 8, 10, 11, and 12, and 14 generally includes the tasks of setting up, adjusting, repairing, oiling, and cleaning the equipment. There are some exemptions and exceptions to some of these regulations, and those are casual babysitting, newspaper delivery, modeling and acting, parental exception, apprentices, student learners. Okay.
What's the parental exception?
If they actually, if the parent have a business and they're actually working for their parents.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
I see.
Yeah. If you, for compliance assistance, you guys can visit www.youthrules.dol.gov. if you want to have more knowledge about the youth rules. And there's some compliance assistance that you could get through there, like the Fair Labor Standards Act, the regulation that covers child labor, which is 29 CFR 570, a handy reference guide, child labor advisor, the bulletins, fact sheets, and FLSA posters that most employers need to have at their businesses with this type of advisories. In order for them to be in compliance. Tip for employers, they need to verify ages of young employees, know the youth employment provisions, train the managers about the youth employment provisions, give minor employees information about the youth employment provisions, review time breakers for minors, post warning levels on prohibited equipment, make compliance important, encourage minors to say no if they are asked to do something that they're prohibited to do, okay, if they do not feel safe, and also if they know that they're not supposed to be doing that. And the tips for young workers: know what they're legally may and they may not do. Know when they they can legally work, and they've got to be aware for their surroundings, and being able to say no when they're asked to do something that they're not supposed to do. Okay, the enforcement related to the question before. The enforcement is conducted by the wage and hour staff throughout the United States. Employees who violate, this is very important too, employees who violate the child labor provisions are subject to civil money penalties up to $11,000 for each violation. And it's each violation. So with those HOs, let's say if they are working with different machinery that they're not supposed to be working with, that could add up very quickly. So,
Esthela,
yes.
Esthela, a question. Do you have records of how many employers, say, were cited, say, last year in the state of Indiana before COVID-19?
I don't have the statistics with me right now. I could get those to you, but I was actually just talking to Crystal about that. There was Southern Indiana, we had a lot of violations where minors were actually working in pizzerias, and they were utilizing the open flame like the pizza ovens, taking in and out the pizzas out of the oven. That falls under one of the HOs, under the hazardous orders. And they were also working outside the allow times of work. They were hiring minors under the age 16, and they were working over the hours that they were allowed to work in a work week. So that resulted in child labor violations and therefore civil money penalties. Also in the state, and I could get those to you, or you can you could find that in Google. There were two fatalities recently, actually, in the state where there were two deaths in Brownsburg and Richmond, Indiana. So right now during COVID, I think a lot of parents, if they don't have, like if the kids are not in school, they want, some parents, they want their kids to work, and they're not really aware of, child labor violations, and they either bringing their kids to work. I think the fatality in Richmond, the father brought his kid to a construction site where I guess, he was helping out, and the structure collapsed on top of the child. And, so it's you know, so there, to answer your question, there's a lot of violations, and I feel like now with COVID-19, a lot of parents are under the maybe the assumption that they can, well, you know, my kid is not working, or they don't have the care, you know, for their kid. And you know, they think that they could bring them to work. In most cases, if they're not, you know, doing anything, or they're not, you know, doing anything hazardous, that they will be fine. But again, it's about the education to the public. So recently, again, we had two fatalities in the States, where, you know, kids went to work and, you know, unfortunately, you know, died because of it.
Wow. Now, in addition to the, of course, you know, the money penalty, are there other consequences that an employer could suffer for violating these rules?
Essentially,
Like, for example, you mentioned the two that died as a result of, you know, violation of the rules. Did it extend?
So under the Fair Labor Standards Act, under our jurisdiction, there will be only the civil money penalties. There might be more penalties, but that will have to be escalated up to our solicitor's office. But as far as like automatically, there will be basically just the civil money penalties, and back wages as well, if, you know, they were not paying the minors at least the minimum wage like they're supposed to be paid. Because again, there's the misconception too that if you're a minor, that they could pay them, you know, whatever. But, you know, if the minor is actually working for an employer, they're supposed to be paid at least minimum wage and overtime.
Very good. Thank you.
Esthela, is there any recourse for a young person who, you know, if their employer asks them to do something that they know they're not supposed to do? I think you talk about the slicing of the meat. Sometimes if their employer asks them to do that and they refuse, and then, you know, they're terminated for that, is there any recourse through your office?
Yeah, they could definitely file a complaint with the Department of Labor at that time.
Okay.
Yeah, because the FLSA also protects against retaliation.
All right.
Under the FLSA. So.
Okay, thank you.
Also, if there's a child labor violation, and this child was employed by a employer that they were engaged in producing goods that they were to be moved across the state lines. If there's a child labor violation asserted, the federal law will prohibit the movement of those goods until those violations are resolved.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And there's the website. Again, you could find more information, wageandhour.dol.gov, or you could call the helpline at 1-866-487-9243. And also I put the nearest office, which for you guys is the South Bend, but I put the Indianapolis District Office line that you guys could call is the public line with any questions, 317-226-6801. Okay, and that concludes my presentation, and I'll turn it over to Brien.
Okay,
Good job,
thanks,
Esthela. Good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Brien Shoemaker, and I'm with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and I'd like to talk to you today about some of our laws, and specifically talk to you about the rights and responsibilities of the youth. Now, one of the things I think is interesting is that I'll be speaking, most of my presentation will be kind of geared towards maybe young workers. But honestly, so if you know some young workers and they're not watching right now, but you can get them to watch later, that's wonderful. But even if you're a small business or even a large business, the information I'm going to be talking to you today is going to be important, because the reality is there's no difference between a young employee working and an old employee working. They both have the same equal rights, and they're protected by equally under all the statutes and the laws that we enforce. The only difference may be that we have one law that protects people that are age 40 and older, and most of our young workers we would consider young a little bit under 40, although I would say that 40 is certainly not old by any means. But that's the way the statute reads. So just a little bit about the EEOC. The EEOC was created in Congress in 1964. We opened our doors in 1965. Rights Act of 1964, Title VII specifically, is the act that created the EEOC. We're an independent federal agency. We're a law enforcement agency, and what we do is we resolve complaints of employment discrimination. And all the laws that we enforce are right there in front of you. The most recognizable, I think, is usually Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. But you probably recognize things like the Americans with Disabilities Act, and probably also the Equal Pay Act. These are really big laws that the EEOC enforces, and we do other things like the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, and also Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. Now, it's sometimes very difficult to understand what these laws actually mean if you're just looking at the language and looking at the words. So I like to think of the laws that we enforce in this way. It is unlawful to discriminate in employment because of these particular protected bases. And that is race, color, disability, genetic information, national origin, sex, which includes pregnancy, and age. And age is 40 and older. And so the younger people watching, you are not protected based on your age. You're only protected under that law if you're older than 40 years or older. Okay. And that's the Age Discrimination and Employment Act. And so this is really what we're looking for when we look at discrimination in the workplace. Now, one of the things I want to talk to you today about is harassment issues. And harassment issues are very important, and we're going to talk about them later, but harassment is protected on all these bases. So a lot of times when we think of harassment, we may think of sexual harassment, and that's something we'll talk briefly about today. But harassment based on any of your protected disability, whether it is disability, you're being harassed because of your disability, whether you're being harassed because of your race, these are all things that you're protected by as far as the EEOC is concerned. So who is protected? So obviously an employee would be protected under our statutes. A temporary worker is protected as well. So maybe it's a worker that's hired through a temporary agency. That employee is also covered under our statutes and our laws. A job applicant. So even if you're just applying for the job, you haven't even received the job yet, you're still covered under our laws. A former employee. So if you leave the workplace, but somehow you're getting bad references, and that's because of a protected basis, then you would be protected. Undocumented workers are protected as well. So you don't have to be documented to be protected under laws. As long as you are working, you're receiving a pay or money from or benefits from a company, then you're going to be considered an employee, and you will be working for considered working under our statutes. So what I want to talk to you today is harassment. Harassment is a big issue, and it's a big issue not only for young workers, but older workers as well. But young workers are kind of unique in the sense that this is maybe your first time to a job. If you're employing young workers, these employees are vulnerable in the sense that they may not have had jobs before, so they may not know what the norms and the rules and what behavior is acceptable and what behavior is unacceptable in the workplace. And so they can be vulnerable to people preying on them, as well as being vulnerable to giving harassment and harassing other people just because they don't understand the norms of what is expected in the workplace. So we first want to think about what harassment is. And harassment is simply this: it's unwelcome verbal or physical conduct, which means that the employee did not invite the conduct, and they regarded that conduct as undesirable. So that's pretty simple. We're talking about conduct that's verbal or physical and that's unwanted. You didn't ask for it, and you think when you get it that it's not desirable. So some things that harassment can include. Now, a lot of times we think of sexual harassment, but it can be harassment based on any protected basis: disability, religion, race. And it could be actual or even attempted assaults. Could be unwanted pressure for sexual favors, unwanted or deliberate touching, cornering, or pinching, unwanted emails, letters, calls, or material of a sexual nature, even materials that's unwanted that of a nature that may be offensive in other ways. It's unwanted teasing, jokes, or remarks, okay? And unwanted sexual looks or staring or gestures. These are all just examples of what harassment can include. So it's important that we understand what these things are. What we want is to make sure that you as an employee don't become a harasser. You should be evaluating as an employee whether your behavior is unwelcome, okay? Is there an equal invitation and participation between you and the person that you're interacting with? Okay, are you equals? Or is maybe that you're not equals, and maybe when you're participating, you're doing most of the participating and that other person is not really participating in this conversation, okay? You need to be aware of that and to understand whether that conversation you're having is either welcome or unwelcome. Would I want my actions to appear in the company newsletter or in the evening news? There's a company in Indianapolis, and one of their rules for behavior is if you don't want this to be in the front page of the Indianapolis Star, then don't do it. And I think that's a really key for any type of behavior. But specifically, you want to think about your actions. Do you want other people to know what actions you're doing? And if the answer is no, I don't want anybody else to know, or I would feel embarrassed if people found out, then those actions may be and probably are unwelcome. And we certainly don't want you to become a harasser in this instance. Would I want someone else to act this way towards a person that I'm in a relationship with? Good question to ask. Okay, are your conduct, is your behavior welcome or unwelcome? And is there equal power between me and the person I'm interacting with? This is really important for the people in your organization that may be in leadership positions, maybe like a line leader. Okay, sometimes those frontline supervisors aren't very much older than the people that they supervise. In a lot of the industry that we have, we're talking about just a couple years, and they still may be young enough not to understand fully what their rights and responsibilities are. So you want to make sure as an organization that anyone that has any kind of authority, whether it is just perceived or whether it is real, they need to know how to behave in the workplace. And they also need to know how to look for things that may be wrong in the workplace or maybe illegal in the workplace.
Brien, I could recall there when working for the Tribune,
Mm-hmm.
that there were times in a meeting, someone would say something that perhaps they would not say, if the door was open. And I can recall many times my superior would say, "How would you like for that to appear in the paper on the front page tomorrow?" And that usually took care of it.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's the type of behavior we're looking for. And as young people entering into the workforce, you may be used to another set of norms and behaviors. When you're hanging out with your friends after school, there are certainly norms and behaviors that are acceptable in that kind of environment. If you're just hanging out and having fun, that's one thing. But if you're in a work environment, there are other norms and behaviors that are expected of you. And not only are they expected, but they're governed by laws that really are very important that you need to know. And it is okay to act one way with your friends and act a different way in the workforce, because it is expected of you to work differently.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So some of the things that I think is really important for new employees to understand are some of the just common workplace behaviors. All right. And that means that never assume friendliness in a workforce. It may be different when you're at your school or, social group, but at work, you never want to assume friendliness also equals a sexual interest. Okay. Don't assume behavior is okay if no one objected. All right, just because no one objected to behavior, they may be so shocked at it, or they may be they might not know what to say. This happens a lot of times when you're experiencing this kind of unwelcome behavior for the first time. You may not object right away, and that could be problems for the person, that's doing the harassment. So please don't, just because someone says that the behavior, doesn't say that the behavior is okay, don't assume that it is okay. Be sensitive to others, act appropriately. If not appropriate for work, don't say it. Don't do it. It's that easy. Okay. Work has its own rules and codes of behavior, and you should be following them. If in doubt, if you're not sure, don't say it. Don't do it. Okay. And if someone says your behavior is unwanted and objectionable, stop doing it and don't do it again. Okay.
Brien, how frequently do you get complaints from undocumented workers?
Oh, well, that's a great question. I do not have I don't have the statistics on that right now. There's a couple reasons why people who are undocumented would not, come to the EOC, even if they are being harassed, or maybe there's other laws that are affecting them. However, we do a lot of outreach to the various communities. We consider undocumented workers to be vulnerable, and so that means that they may be taken advantage of by companies. And so we want to make sure that we provide outreach to them in various ways so that they understand what the laws are and understand that they can come to the EOC. The EOC isn't going to be looking at their status, their citizen status. If they are getting paid to do a job, then they're considered employees as far as we're concerned, and we're pretty clear on that, so they can come to us and we can look into those issues. But I don't have the exact statistics in front of me right now.
Well,
I can get them to.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that you do outreach. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
That's very good.
Yeah. The youth at work and immigrants, they're considered vulnerable workers, and we try to provide as much outreach to those communities as possible, because a lot of times they don't know. They're either new to the workforce, or maybe they don't understand the complexities of some of our laws. That goes for immigrants as well as youth, not understanding what our laws actually, how they protect them. And so we want to make sure that we're providing good information to those individuals. Okay. In fact, one of the things that you can do, speaking of some ways our laws affect you, if you feel that you are being discriminated against, okay, this is not just harassment, but any type of harassment, any type of discrimination, you want to tell the person to stop, okay? You want to report it to your supervisor, all right? If it's your supervisor that's doing the harassment, then you need to go report it to HR or somebody in the organization that can listen to you and that can do something, okay? Tell your parents or your guardians about the situation. And lastly, you can always contact the EOC, and we can provide counseling for you as well.
Brien,
one thing,
is there an age requirement to file a charge? I know some of these workers, we learned from Esthela, are 14 or 15. Can they file themselves?
No, there's not an age. Well, so if they are under, I believe under 18, they do have to have a parent or guardian. In most cases, they have to have a parent or guardian signature. I have not experienced, I've been with the commission for 20 years. I have not experienced a time when we were not able to do that. Okay, we do certainly get complaints from youth employees that are younger, and we have always been able to get a signature for that.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, but they can certainly come to the EEOC, and even I would suggest for any youth out there watching, if they don't feel comfortable coming with their parent or guardian, they can at least make an inquiry, and we can counsel them. There may be other ways that we can try to resolve the issue, or in some way. So really what we're asking, you as an employee is to, be responsible, but also part of that is to know what the law is. And that either means by listening to people like me, or just even looking on the EEOC's website to understand your rights. The EEOC's website is fabulous. It's www.eeoc.gov. And it has lots of good information for employees as well as employers. And you just want to make sure that you're being a good, responsible employee. Maintain a good work ethic. Arrive on time, leave at time. Don't extend breaks or lunches. Be honest, even if those around you are not. Share your knowledge. If you know about your rights as an employee, share that with your other friends or your coworkers. And show respect. That's key. Respect is so key when trying to eliminate harassment in the workplace. Respect the other people, your coworkers, respect your regardless of race, age, sex, national origin, or color, disability. Just be the person that is able to show what the correct behavior is in the workplace. And finally, I'm just going to leave you with some tips here. I know we're running short on time. Just keep yourself out of trouble. Remember, you are accountable for your actions. Okay, so inappropriate behavior by others is not an excuse for your inappropriate behavior. Okay, so just because everybody else is doing it doesn't mean that you can join in and do it as well. People that are harassing people in the workplace are breaking federal law. All right, and you need to know that. And if you're going to get involved with that, there are consequences, and there certainly can be consequences to that. So make sure that you're keeping your actions accountable. And I had just some tips for being a successful harassment policy, but that's more for the for employers. Most importantly for employers, it's just putting in writing. Make sure that whatever your harassment policy is or whatever your discrimination policies are, put them in writing and then communicate that to your employees so that they know what behavior is acceptable in the workplace and what behavior is not acceptable in the workplace. And then make sure if you're a supervisory employee, you're modeling that behavior for all of the other employees. So that's very briefly some of the behaviors that we hope to either eliminate by the disrespectful or rude and harassing behaviors in the workplace, but hopefully bring in respect and accountability for the employees. If you have questions, the EEOC website is wonderful. It's eeoc.gov. You can always contact me as well. My name again is Brien Shoemaker. I'm with the Indianapolis District, but the Indianapolis District is all of Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, and half of Ohio. So you can contact me if you wish, and you can reach me at 463-999-1132 if you have any questions about this. So thank you very much. I'm going to back over to Crystal.
Thanks, Brien. I did have one question similar
Sure.
to how Ed asked about if there were stats on undocumented employees who filed charges. Are there any stats on maybe under 18 who filed charges with the EEOC?
You know what? That's a great question. I'm not sure. I would have to look to see if we have stats on people that are under 18 that file with the EEOC. I'm not sure, actually, if we keep specific records on that.
Yeah.
But I can find out for you.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks, Brien.
And Brien, Ed, another question.
Sure.
With all the social unrest we've been going on in the country the past several months, have you noticed an uptick in calls to your office or charges filed?
So what we've actually found is not necessarily with the youth at work, but we have found an uptake in charges that deal with national origin discrimination, specifically Asian American discrimination. And that may be, and we think it may be due to some perceptions about the coronavirus itself and maybe where the origins of the coronavirus are. But that's really the only uptick that we have seen in particular that would be unusual to see at this time. Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you both for your presentations today. A lot of information, and I know it was a short amount of time to present, but we can always reach out to your agencies, and people can even call the Human Rights Commission, and we can get that information to you, or email us at humanrights@southbendin.gov. And our phone number is 574-235-9355. So I want to thank you again, Esthela Sandoval from the Department of Labor and Brien Shoemaker with the EEOC. Ed, did you want to have any last words?
Well, again, I too thank you, and excellent presentations. Very well done. And we really appreciate your time and effort.
Absolutely. And Ed, I appreciate you being on here as well. And so that concludes our webinar. Our next one is scheduled in 2 weeks, Tuesday, September 8th at 11 a.m. We are planning on a webinar on LGBTQ concerns. So thanks again, everyone, and that concludes our webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.